You're listening to KCLA 99.3 FM, Los Angeles.
I'm singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling. I'm happy again. Oh, yes, I am. This is KCLA, Singing in the Rain, and I am your host, Sunny Chayes. And I am here to do a bit of a roundup for Marianne Williamson, who did a very, very important event, in my opinion, called SisterGiant, and it was held a few weeks ago, but the love is going to continue, the energy is going to continue with many other projects built around that, and as we know, when something wonderful happens in the world, there is the ripple effect. Marianne Williamson is a mega best-selling author who has written some incredible books, and as a matter of fact, she just wrote a book called The Law of Divine Compensation, and I have read it, and I love it, and we'll be talking about that soon, too. All these pieces are coming together for our planet right now with really shaking up what we used to know to be true and really getting at some real truths and digging out some negative stuff, letting it go, and getting to the, as I say, the real truth and the real power of what we can do and be and accomplish from here on out in our lives. So I, again, really admire and honor Marianne for taking the time and the energy and the finances and everything to pull this event together and to bring all of these incredible women and men together to enjoy a weekend of very important stuff. So without further ado, let us just bring her on. Be here and kind of do a roundup, wrap up, just kind of create a container for this amazing event that you did with SisterGiant. And I know it was quite a process in bringing it, and then you brought it home, and then now here we are to chat about it. So I want to ask you what you, first of all, what your idea was, what you wanted to create. What did you want to do?
I feel that American women should be a moral force on the planet. I have this vision, and it's this way in which anytime there is fear of something horrifying happening on the planet, the people all over the world would say, with full seriousness and without irony, in a very reassuring way to others, and we don't have to worry about that because American women would never let that happen. And the outrageousness of the vision is juxtaposed with the fact that, seemingly unbeknownst to most American women, we have the power to be such a force. We are 51% of the most powerful country on earth. Our financial power collectively, our political power collectively, and what should be our moral power, our emotional power collectively. Our absolute conviction that it is our responsibility, not just individually as mothers, but collectively as women, to demand, if necessary, better care and protection for the young of our species and for the planet on which we live. And people said to me, why the phrase SisterGiant, which is nothing but a phrase. But I can see why those two words put together emerged from my own subconscious mind. Sister, because I grew up at a time when feminism concentrated more on the notion of sisterhood than it seems to now. Young women are growing up certainly aware that we should have equal rights and power and all of those kinds of things, which are important. But back in the 1970s, there was more of a sense that none of us would make it unless all of us made it. The sisterhood element was very important then, and I see it underemphasized today. The giant aspect has to do with the fact that I think we are called to be bigger women. Too many American women are little girls masquerading as men, as women. And too many of our men are boys masquerading as men. We have not just an identity crisis, but a maturity crisis in our society. And I don't think it's because we're Peter Pans who don't want to grow up. I think there are a lot of reasons for it, why it happened. But what is most significant is that I think people long for the experience of being mature, effective adults. We want to be. And I wanted this to be a weekend where we experienced our sisterhood. I wanted us to have the experience of being in a room filled with many women, not to the exclusion of men. Men certainly were invited. But there is something happens, and I think it's true of them too. I mean, there are times in life when it's only men in a group and times when it's only women in a group. This doesn't demean or denigrate or even exclude the other necessarily. It's simply an experience, you know, going back to ancient times, you know, or hundreds of years ago, men would raise the barn and women would quilt. I mean, that's not all bad. There's a particular kind of bonding with people of your own sex that has its place in life. And I also wanted women to feel not only sisterhood, and the collectivity of American womanhood, but I wanted women to leave feeling a little more grown up. And that's where the giant thing, let's be bigger girls. Let's not so constantly allow ourselves to be lured into preoccupation with ultimately meaningless things. When you've got children living in poverty, billions on the planet, hardly able to survive, children on the planet who are starving, 17,000 children every day, mass incarceration, highest incarceration rate, Citizens United, these indirect, if not direct threats to American democracy. Now we've got the situation in the Middle East flaring up again. I was reading on the internet the other day just about the horrible air quality, because there are no air quality standards in America's public schools. So the issue of America's children is particularly poignant and sobering, because in a society like ours where financial interests wield political power almost to the exclusion of anyone else, that leaves children out completely, because children do not have any economic leverage. The CNN special I saw said that 1/3 of America's public schools would be considered substandard in terms of air quality. And 40% of our teachers and our students are already affected. There were all these people whose children had respiratory problems and asthma, this huge rise in asthma. They took the children out and put them in parochial schools, put them in private schools, and guess what? Their respiratory problems ended. How horrifying is that? That should be considered a national scandal. It should be a huge issue, but it is not. And it won't be unless those of us who care. Children can't stand up and scream about it in the political realm. Who's going to if not us? So I think, at least for that one shining moment, as it were, of this weekend, a large group of American women looked at very sobering statistics, heard about very sobering things, and held it in our hearts in a very sober way, emotionally, psychologically. I felt heard when I talked about the Gandhian principle of soul force, satyagraha, that there is actual power in bearing witness to the suffering of others. I remember before the Saturday afternoon program, when we were going to be hearing about child poverty, when we were going to be hearing about the mass incarceration issue, when we were and the drug war, we were going to be hearing about Citizens United, when I said to the audience, this is when you will want to start texting your friends. This is when you will want to go out into the lobby, look at the book table, go to the bathroom, start emailing. This is when, if you're looking at this on live stream, you'll be tempted to go get a sandwich. That is the problem. Please stay for this. And I mean not just with your body. Bear witness. You know, in the work that I do, I'm very aware that the quality of the listening of the audience is as important as the quality of the sharing that goes on stage. It's a dance, and it's a dynamic which depends on the participation, the energetic participation of both partners.
Always.
It's like raising a child. When children are little and they sort of subconsciously, they will let you know what they're ready to hear. Well, with an audience, you can only go as deep as there's a listening that allows you to. And that's what I was very happy about in SisterGiant. I had made it clear what we were going to be talking about. You know, somebody had said to me on one interview, well, you know, that bottom line question people have is, what's in it for me? What do you say to that? About women thinking about coming to SisterGiant, what's in it for me? I said, women who are asking that question probably are not the audience. Probably not much, if you're at that level of questioning. So I was pleased to begin with by how many women showed up knowing we were going to be discussing some very serious issues. And so I felt satisfied not only by what I think people got from the weekend, but by what so many people gave to the weekend.
Well, I think that you should be very, very congratulated because, again, I think that it was because of you they came. You put the flag in the sand, you know, and you said, okay, come gather and let's just do what we do and just find out what's going to happen. And most people did not know what they were going to really be hearing. And you put a bit out, you know, a few breadcrumbs, but that was it. And again, I applaud you and honor you that you would bring this campfire and have the people gather, or as we talked about before, the dining room table, the picnic blanket, and have everyone come with a real openness. And I appreciate the fact that people didn't really know, because it was like, well, I'm open, I'm witnessing, I'm here with other witnesses, and I also felt that there was a great participation. There was a lot of energy of people taking notes, of people recording things, of people chatting about things after. I hope that everybody was doing that, but I was doing it, so maybe that's what I saw. But I think that you're right, that you can't say things to people who are not really ready to take it deeply, and you happen to have gathered, I think, the right gang for this event. One thing you were saying about women being little girls, I mean, there's a tradition in the Jewish tradition that I love, which is called bar mitzvah. And I look at that bar mitzvah and I think, oh my gosh, I mean, it is such an awesome experience for a young boy, man at a really great age to take on a lot of responsibility, to understand what his culture is about, what has gone before him, what he brings and will bring to his family. And girls don't have a training to do anything, really. We don't even have home ec anymore in schools. I mean, it's amazing what we just kind of grow up slowly. And so I absolutely agree with you that women are masquerading as women and having a very, young, innocent little girl energy. And also the separateness. It's like, well, we're wherever we are, and we may have feelings about what's going on in the Middle East or the food lines, but what are we going to do? How can we do it on our own? And so that's what I think SisterGiant was able to allow to have a place in the world where that came together.
I agree with you about the crisis of maturity, and of course the Jewish culture is an ancient one, and in many ancient cultures there is the coming of age ceremony, that ritual through which and during which the child, and also I think the child's parents and the child's community, makes a psychic break from the years of childhood and enters into the years of maturity. Often, and Judaism included, this is a survival technique of cultures which literally will not make it if the grown-ups aren't behaving like grown-ups. And one of the reasons why it's in question whether or not American democracy and even human civilization as we know it will survive and thrive over the next few centuries is because we're not behaving. Our adults are not, in all cases, behaving like grown-ups. In my book, Illuminata, I wrote a coming-of-age ceremony. And one of the reasons this idea had been brought home to me so strongly was because of my own experience with my daughter's bat mitzvah. I think one of the most powerful moments in my life, actually, was when at the end of the ceremony, the cantor leads my daughter off the bima, and he brings her over to me. I was sitting in the front row, and he said, "You brought her here a child. I return her to you a woman." And that theme, that you become a woman in the eyes of God, or that you become a woman in the eyes of your community, or a man, that you are a child no longer, is important. And as I said, societies don't survive when grown-ups don't act like grown-ups.
It is true. You're absolutely right about so many cultures having grown-up ceremony. And I think, as you say, it helps the parents make that break. It makes the community get it. And I think it does that for your daughter. It does that for that child when they go through that process. And it is a training. It's a year process. It's a journey. I think at this point, though, what will we do now? So as adults, now we will just grow up now.
Well, you know, my cousins became bat mitzvah at 40 years old. And I think that is indicative of something that's happening in the culture. As I was saying before, I think people want to be grown-ups. I don't think that we're living at a time when people are walking around proud of the fact that they are behaving like children, and they know it. And I think one of the reasons there was an audience for SisterGiant is because among women particularly, there's a sense that we are underinformed about things that matter. It's not that we don't care. It's not that we're apathetic. It's not that we don't have a gut instinct that is fine and good and decent. It's that when we don't have the facts to back it up, we have an emotional reticence to express our bottom line feeling about something unless we have facts to back it up, much more than men do. I heard about a study that said if a man feels 20% confident, he will speak his mind. A woman has to feel 80% confident to speak her mind. And it's ancient cellular memory on some level of times when we were punished savagely. And we are not, the punishment we receive now for standing in our truth is not that we will be burned at the stake, but we are likely to be marginalized, trivialized, embarrassed, humiliated, made fun of. And that is not nothing on the emotional landscape of a woman. And I think that is also very germane to why women are not running for political office the way in the numbers that would really make the difference. Once again, I don't want to fail to celebrate the good that is occurring. For instance, in this last political election, we have now 20 senators, U.S. Senators out of 100. So certainly it's much better than it was. Much, much better. We're improving, but we still have a long way to go, and we can't just rest on our laurels. But statistically, women are not represented more equally in Congress and in state houses, not because the electorate is loath to vote for a woman. After all, the electorate is 50% women, but because women are not running. So I wanted to address that in SisterGiant, and I feel that we did. I find too many really fabulous women for whom the idea of running for political office is so like in another universe. They could imagine themselves doing anything. They could imagine themselves becoming an astronaut. They could imagine themselves building a multi-billion-dollar empire. They could imagine themselves having 6 children, or they could imagine themselves doing anything, but running for office, they can't even imagine it. Yeah. And I think that that's not real healthy. So I think we made a dent in that one with SisterGiant.
Well, I think you absolutely did. And a couple of things I want to mention that happened. I was so grateful to be there, and my intention before it started was to be able to be there and catch the spontaneous acts of magic and brilliance and love. And I thought, okay, they'll be here today. I'm sure they'll be here. And there were a few of them that were amazing. I would love for you to talk about the spontaneous act of generosity that happened on the second day with the...
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there's a woman named Marilyn Rainwater, and she ran for state legislature in Oklahoma this last year. But when I had met her during her campaign, I had gone to do a benefit fundraiser for this organization called Sally's List, which is women who support progressive women running in office in Oklahoma. And I had met Marilyn Rainwater, who was one of the candidates they were supporting that year. I talked to her for 5 minutes, and I said, I'm doing this conference in LA, will you come to Los Angeles? Because her spunk was so powerful and exciting. I come from Texas myself, so Texas women and Oklahoma women, there's a real similar energy, you know, cowgirl almost. And she did not win her race, but she will be running again in this next election. And people in Los Angeles got to see what attracted me to her and got to share my enthusiasm about her. She came from a very poor family herself. And so the subject of the suffering of America's poor, but particularly the children of America's poor, is a fire that burns in her belly. We have 23.1% child poverty rate in the United States, which among 35 developed nations in the world makes us second only to Romania. And how she had tried to make a difference as a social worker and within the departments within the Oklahoma government, which should theoretically be able to make a difference, and her coming to understand, her awakening to the fact that these people, particularly men who were in power in the Oklahoma legislature, were not going to do anything but shine her on. We're not going to do anything but patronizingly, condescendingly affirm that what she was doing was real nice, but they weren't going to actually do anything to help these children. And that's when this awakening became her political awakening, and she said, I'm just going to run for that office myself. And she didn't win, but she's going to run again. And when I came back on stage to thank her, a woman came up. Remember, there were probably 1,000 people in the room.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, at least. And a woman came up with a $10 bill and said, I want to give this for Marilyn's campaign. And that began a spontaneous combustion of people coming from all over the room. Somebody said to me, you can't stop an avalanche, Marianne. With $10, I saw a few $20 bills. Now, they put it in a big paper bag. Nobody ever reported back to me, but I'm sure she made several $100s. And certainly, I'm sure that she saw that as a sign from God that she is to run again.
What I thought was so beautiful about it was witnessing it. I was in the back of the room, and I saw, like you say, someone walk down with a $10 bill, and then like 10 people, everyone with their green, you know, then another sort of 10 people, and then like 30 people, and then they were blocking the aisles, and one of your assistants came out with like a Whole Foods bag, and the money was kind of going in it, and it was so beautiful, and I think it was such a gorgeous illustration for the people, not just for your lovely guests, but, you know,
yes. As
for all of us.
You mention it, I am thinking that perhaps I should have taken it further and made more of a point about how, as we begin to run on these kinds of issues, this kind of manifestation will occur for anyone here. But I think that was obvious to anybody.
It was, and it was such a beautiful demonstration. It was so magical, and as I say, I'm so glad I was in the absolute back of the room, because just the love and the excitement is what I really want to say. People were standing, they were applauding, it was as if everyone was giving everyone a standing ovation. It was so awesome, literally. Right. I use that word in the true sense. The power, the love, the beauty, the excitement, the happiness. It was like, yay, we get to do this. This person is so great, and we get to take some money, and hey, who's with me? Let's all, like you say, it was an avalanche, and it really was great. And I know it was inspiring for everyone in the room. And I mean, that's kind of how Obama won the first time. It was like a whole lot of $5 bills. People getting on the phone and having phone parties, and everybody calling and saying, just give $5, just give $5. And, you know, it really adds up. And you were so great. You were like, well, this is some cash. I think this is a message for you. But truly, I believe it was a message for everyone in the room.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I have asked Mastin Kipp and Stephen Dinan if they would do a phone call with me. I want to, that would be one of our conference calls, because I want to talk about taking it to the next step. This whole idea of a politics where love rather than economics is the bottom line, that humanitarian values rather than economic values order our civilization, is obviously not just a woman's conversation. That's an American conversation. That's a human conversation. We'll get there, but I felt we needed to have one meeting like this. I also want to mention that we're going to be doing these monthly conference calls. And the first one, which will be the first Wednesday in December, will be with Michael Lerner, Rabbi Michael Lerner, talking about the Middle East crisis. And the first Wednesday in January, our conference call will be talking about the poor air quality in America's public schools. And I'm pleased about these conference calls, because I think that we will have a chance to continue the conversation around issues that I believe a conscience-based politics would take on, so that I hope people will listen in and continue the infusion of serious political issues within the context of the most spiritual consideration for what needs to happen on the planet.
I think that's great, and I'll be promoting that. So
thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
And also, I like the idea of Rocky Anderson. So he was there, and he was really, really great. How did you enjoy him?
Well, I share your enthusiasm for Rocky Anderson. I even see that twinkle in your eye. Rocky Anderson's cute, and everybody notices that too. Rocky Anderson actually had asked me to be his vice presidential candidate in his presidential race.
Oh my
I
God,
did not
Marianne.
take him up on that kind offer, but my enthusiasm for him is very high. And many people do not know what a background in very traditional politics Rocky Anderson has. He was mayor of Salt Lake City for 8 years. Mm. And he is continuing in his work in what he sees as the formation of a movement around many of the policies that he cares about most and that many of us care about most. Mm-hmm. Recognizing that beyond the chokehold, the stranglehold that the two-party system has on American political issues, there are much broader concerns that neither Democrats nor Republicans seem to even want to bring to the fore, such as poverty, such as the real state of the environment, such as issues of the diminishment of our democratic liberties, civil rights in this country. So I think we've only just begun to hear the best of Rocky Anderson, and I'm totally with you in celebrating what he's about and wanting to do all I can, as you do as well, to get his message and his word and his voice out there.
So we are going to stop there for a moment because I have a quick moment or two with Rocky. I was able to grab him at Marianne's. And again, you are listening to KCLA, Singing in the Rain with Sonny Chayes. And you will be hearing ambient sounds this show and the next show because we were just recording while people were having dinner and lunch and just enjoying the event. So just let us bring Rocky on and enjoy him. We are very excited to have you. Oh my God, Rocky, I was so amazed to hear you speak. You were amazing. And Rocky ran for President of the United States for the Justice Party. And so I'm just gonna let him chat a little bit because he rocks. So rockin' Rocky.
Very kind. It's been an amazing 2 days here at SisterGiant. The auditorium's been packed, the speakers have been fantastic, and I've been really honored and pleased to join in this because I think the sense of this is very positive and that people want to see a major shift. We're through this election now. But people aren't satisfied by any means. They want to see an end to the civil and human rights violations. They want to see changes in our economy. They want to see an end to the disparity in wealth and income. They want to see an end to the record incarceration rate in this country, and I think the war on drugs. They want to see an end to poverty. They want to see children poverty addressed. And it was never even discussed during the race, at least between the two main presidential candidates. And I get a real sense more and more that people are getting it about climate change and that they recognize that the climate crisis is the most consequential, urgent issue facing our planet. So
And that is Rocky. Unfortunately, we didn't get more from him because we had technical difficulties. But we will have him on the show, I am sure. And I want to just bring Marianne back and again remind you that we are recording sort of live. So forgive my sounds of things in the background, but it's just kind of that vibe this time. So we're back with Marianne. I must say, SisterGiant gave the opening of being more educated, of being more grounded in our knowledge, of questioning a little bit more.
A young woman said to me at my Monday night talk right after SisterGiant, she raised her hand and she said, "I listened to NPR today." I know, bless her. I was so happy. I thought, that's exactly it. She was so proud of herself. I listened to NPR today.
And next will be listen to the BBC. But
And who knows what she'll do one day.
That's the thing. I mean, really giving ourselves permission to question, to look deeper, to not just listen to the sound bites and think that is
and
knowledge.
Also to look more deeply into our own hearts for what role we might play. You know, there's the story that we all know about the frogs in the boiling water. If frogs are thrown into boiling water, they jump right out. But if they're already in a pot of hot water and it starts to boil, they don't register a tipping point. They don't seem to register the point at which, if I stay in this water, I'll die. Or maybe it's that the hot water starts to paralyze their muscles. Either way, the point is, if the heat goes up incrementally, they die. Whereas if they're just thrown in hot water, and I fear that is how we're behaving today. American democracy, in some already critical ways, whether it's the National Defense Authorization Act or any myriad of moves that have shaved off some of the edge, the powerful edginess of freedom and civil liberties and the whole notion of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's occurring right in front of our eyes, and yet we're not reacting the way we might. You know, we have a young man in the room with us now from Berlin. The Germans, because of their history, and this is true of countries which have experienced things like what they experienced with Hitler, are much more sensitive to breaches than we are, because we've been lulled into a false sense of safety and complacency. Europeans see this about us. It's ironic and unfortunate.
Yes, you mentioned that, and I really appreciated speaking with Tim, our engineer, about that, because he's younger and he explained to me that what you're saying is really true, and that there was, at a certain point, there was a huge, huge anger that was collected in a small number of people, actually. And as Archbishop Desmond Tutu says, most everything has changed through small groups of passionate, powerful,
well, that
perhaps
whole Margaret
angry.
Mead line, never underestimate what a small group of committed people can do.
Because it's always been a small group.
Right. Well, society never changes because the majority wakes up one day and says, let's do it differently. The majority didn't wake up one day and say, let's free the slaves. The majority didn't wake up one day and say, let's give women the right to vote. Now, this is as true on the negative as is on the positive, that it's a small group of people. On the positive, it's a small group of people who are usually considered outrageous radicals by the status quo of their time. But you know, even when you look at something like SisterGiant, the power, one of the themes I talked about that weekend was the idea of a positivity team. I was even thinking about 5 minutes ago talking to you. You make it so easy to talk about these things. Just like we were talking about with an audience and how an audience invites you, gives you permission. Well, you give me permission to talk about these things. There are a lot of journalists whose entire attitude would be so mocking and would be so, what are you, who are you kidding? That it becomes very difficult to speak, it's a brick wall. And I think that's why the emphasis on collectivity is so important right now. That the only way we will be able to get this kind of a message and this kind of a conversation out there is if all of us collaborate in doing so, which is why I appreciate your having me.
Thank you. So that is my interview with Marianne Williamson. And again, we will check out SisterGiant.com. There are also many, many bits of information on the website about all of the speakers there, and I highly, highly recommend doing that. I also recommend going to the lives or the actual streams so that you can appreciate this experience. And for all of those who were there, my sisters and brothers who were there, I salute you for being there and for staying there. And we will continue this conversation, this energy about being more involved, being a bit more grown up, being a bit more responsible for our vote, our voice, and our lives. And I want to go out to a song called Pipes of Peace. That is a Paul McCartney song sung by Samantha Landrum. And
I light a candle to our love.
a beautiful
In
song.
love our problems disappear. But all in all we soon discover that one and one is all we long to hear.